Good morning, everybody. Or actually afternoon now, given it's 12 o'clock. I'd first like to start by acknowledging country. Today, the meeting that we're going to be conducting is on the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I'd like to pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to extend that respects and thoughts to your mob. I know you guys are going to be dialing in from across the country in various locations, so I acknowledge you, your peoples, and your traditional elders past and present. So for today's agenda, we're going to go through a brief introduction with myself and Richard. We're going to talk about a couple of key topics for today. Why is this profession important? Where is it going? Some of the barriers to success within this profession, some ingredients for excellence in this profession, how students might accelerate your careers or success, and then we'll hand it over to you for some Q&A. Through the course of our chat this morning, we might actually throw some questions over to you guys early. So as Adam mentioned, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat window. We'll try and make it as interactive as possible. But if anyone has any burning questions, you're more than welcome to just write them down and then we'll address them at the end. So that being said, moving on. So for those who haven't had the pleasure of meeting me yet, as I always say, my name is Michael Mieni. I'm a proud Wonkamaran, Nyamba and Barkindji man. Mum and dad are from the country town in the back of Bourke. For those who don't know, it's generally defined as the outback of Australia. Having a community mindset has really helped me in my personal growth as well as my career over the last 15 years. I've worked across many different organisations in many different capacities. I've worked for Hoyts as a cinema, I've worked as an RSL bar attendant, I've worked for Metcash or IGA, which was a really cool opportunity because I got to work in all the distribution centres across all of Australia. My current employment is a full-time senior business analyst at Westpac, where I also take on the seconded role of a project manager, iteration manager, change coordinator and scrum master. They like to give us lots of opportunity and challenges at Westpac, and so I've had really good opportunities over the last year. I'll pass to Richard.
Thanks, Michael. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Richard Ridge. I currently work as a consultant for a boutique consulting business based in Sydney, specialising in Office 365, cybersecurity and cloud environments in Azure and AWS. I did a BA as a degree, and after that I got into IT, working initially for my father's IT business, and then I left and did some travelling and ended up working in IT in London for 4.5 years, and then came back to Australia and continued my IT career. My background in the main has been around database environments and operations, and also data analytics, but I've moved more into the cloud space over the recent years.
Thanks, Rich. Cool. So why is this profession important? I guess I wouldn't mind starting by opening the question to anyone. Can anyone actually tell me a business or service that does not involve any one form of technology? I'll leave it to the chat window just quickly to see if anyone can tell me a business or service. Okay, doesn't look like anyone's been able to think of one. Markets. Yeah, well, I guess markets is one business or area, but the way I like to approach that is, well, if you look at the way we either market or sell or procure products and services through markets, it does kind of relate to some form of information system or database. So as much as the business itself could potentially not be technology, it may rely on some form of dependent technology to enable or use it. But the key point there, guys, is basically when I think about technology, it plays a role in how we enhance our day-to-day lives in everything that we do. I'm pretty sure all of you can think of, from the moment you wake up to the minute you go to work, or the minute you perform an activity to the minute you come home, I can guarantee you there's definitely multiple ways that you will receive, interpret, or see information being presented or exchanged with you through a different form of device, visual display, or other form of technology. And I feel like personally through my journey in continuing my honours study at UTS, I've kind of seen that we're at a bit of a point where there's a bit of a digital divide currently within First Nations people and technology. What I mean by that is, we all consume technology through our mobile devices and all those kind of things as mob, but no one actually is coming up as tertiary qualified or knowledge holders within the technology space to be those kind of pivotal leaders to really drive projects and things within the community, which I think it's a bit of a problem. Participation, that also extends to participation. So if our people aren't necessarily going through the channels directly relating to IT, they're kind of going off in the various different areas, which is perfectly fine. I like to see a future where we have a lot of knowledge holders, a lot of different industries and spaces. But if we don't necessarily start gravitating more towards technology at different levels, as we all can see with the advancement of different companies and organizations, the futures are technology companies. Technology companies are really leading the way to actually changing how we, our behaviors and how we act day to day. So if we don't necessarily get a lot of our knowledge holders and people progressing to learn those skills and domain knowledge in those areas, it's going to be a really challenging future for us as mob to try and come together and work constructively. I'm sure through a lot of your studies, one thing you may have realized is that when you think of First Nations peoples, we're so heavily recorded, whether it be through education, whether it be through health, whether it be through the juvenile justice or the law systems. There is so much data that's being recorded against First Nations peoples. And I'd love to see a future where we can actually get lots of knowledge holders and a lot of smart black fellas and sisters who can come together, do some data analytics with this data and actually start providing information to our communities to increase the amount of positive outcomes that a lot of these health and law and all these other programs can actually deliver for us mob. Just looking over. That's right. So what I've listed on this slide as well is basically, when I think about it, the key areas where technology is playing a pivotal role for our communities today are connecting people. A lot of our mob use Facebook now. Back when I was just leaving high school, Facebook was kind of just starting to kick off. And it was really nice to see over the last 2 years, a lot of actually tribal groups, Wonkamaran's one of my peoples, they've actually created a Facebook group, and that's just been such an amazing opportunity for me to connect with my mob from across New South Wales, but also listen to a couple of the ideas and things that are happening in the community. Unfortunately for some of us, a lot of us have to move away from our traditional homes and places in order to attend universities and learning education institutes far from our lands. So I think that technology is playing an amazing role in the way that we're able to connect with each other and maintain that connection while we're abroad. Cultural preservation has definitely been one of the front of mind strategies for the country. I know there's the National Archives. If you go down to Canberra, if you go out to communities, there's various different pockets of areas where people are actually making sure that they're working with elders in communities to make sure we preserve as much culture as we can. And I think that's so important because I've also come across a lot of examples through my studies where people are actually, it's how you record the culture, but it's also the structure and the governance process around how it's actually recorded. What I mean by that is, I've seen examples in Sydney where people have actually created language dictionaries. Now, that seems fine, but if you dig under the surface, essentially they've taken records from First Fleet extracts and journals, etc., where people have recorded particular words and meanings, which doesn't necessarily translate to what the actual meanings are. It was just a point in time, someone's interpretation who didn't have that cultural lens has actually recorded that information. So it's then being used to say, well, that's now the definition. I've learned that a lot of community groups and cultural people have actually said, well, actually there's a governance process we've had as Indigenous peoples, and they'd actually like to come together and have consultation and develop a further understanding before they make a vote and actually lock in those type of things. So I think it's really important that we maintain those processes when we're actually recording our culture, and it's something I'd like you guys to think about as you pursue your careers. And basically sharing culture, I'm sure a lot of you guys, if you go to the Google App Store now, 10 years ago, you'd be hard pressed to find any Indigenous apps. Now they're everywhere. I'm pretty sure there's a language app for nearly every language group across all the country. And that's really important to share our languages and culture. But another thing I'd like to share with you guys is one thing I've learned is we need something to centralize a lot of it. Ideally, in technology, when you centralize something, it makes it become a lot more, you have a simple framework that you can actually apply to many different language groups. Unfortunately, because a lot of other people have just done their bespoke projects where they're actually just pumping out these language apps or apps relating to culture, everyone's disjointed. So no one's actually thinking about a unified standard to say, if I'm going to create a language app, I need to do it this way, so that if other people create a language app, you have that consistency across a lot of these apps. I really appreciate the individuality and the way that other language groups have designed it. But from a technology point of view, essentially, when you start breaking it down to a technical nature. A lot of it just, it's archiving on databases, and it's the way we actually receive and interpret information. That's all pretty consistent. So, I hope when all of you grow up and pursue your various different careers and avenues, that you guys thinking about, well, rather than reinventing the wheel, how do you actually think about or connect with people who've created these apps, or how might you think about the next framework that you can actually put forward, which will actually start helping our mob actually come together, and then you can kind of build yourself that way. Cool. And lastly, that I feel there's a wealth of opportunity for any young fellas like yourselves to grow in this space. Through my personal career, the way I've progressed it, and I was saying to Richard before, every organization that I've worked in, I was the only First Nations person in technology. And I can even say that at Westpac. I'm the only black fellow at Westpac in tech. Oh, actually there's 3 of us. I just realized there's 2 other fellows, but they're on a side branch. But it's a heavily underrepresented area, and there's so much opportunity for you fellas to kind of progress in your own different journeys. Technology is a very large industry. You've got your traditional paths of potentially development. So, that goes off into your web, your application. There's all the development channels. You've got your semi-professional roles, whether it be business analysts, project managers, scrum masters, all those kind of project-related roles. And then you've also got these new roles where you've got UX design. There's so many different roles, and you've got analytics. You've now got ISG. You've got security. There's so many different avenues that you can proceed. And if you guys champion and go through those, one thing for me is an insight is in corporate. I've had a lot of conversations about, Michael, how do we get more of you? How do we get more of you First Nations peoples up in technology roles? Because we have a desire to definitely employ you fellas, but we don't know who to talk to. And so I've kind of echoed that, well, through CareerTrackers and the work that they do, they've created the pipeline to say, we're giving opportunities for these young students who are coming through, but I can assure you, if you guys stick it and see it through, there's definitely opportunities waiting for you once you get through the barriers of doing your internship, doing your degrees, and then getting into these grad programs or organizations. Cool. Do you want to add to anything to that, Rich?
Oh, great.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yep. So guys, barriers of success, there's actually quite a few when I think about it. And if I look at my personal journey, it's been very interesting. But if I was to summarize it, I like to summarize down to 3 key points. So when I think about those 3 points, the first one for me was self-doubt. So when I first started my first semester at uni, it was a massive shift in learning. When you go for your HSC, you get crammed with content in a different way. But when you're in a classroom of about 20, 30 people, it's a bit more focused. You can kind of work through it. But I remember my first lecture, I sat in a lecture hall, and it was literally like 300 students. The person came in, said some stuff, and then left an hour later and said pretty much, good luck, everybody. I'm expecting you guys to step up and do your own work. And, students are going to pass or they're going to fail. And that's just how it is. So there's a bit of a shift in the learning model. It was quite challenging for me. I did the silliest thing in the world, where in my first semester at uni, I actually picked 4 technical subjects to study. So I was doing programming fundamentals, which was Java. I was doing web systems, which was Ubuntu. What's that? So I was using that. Yeah, Unix. I also picked web development because I was learning HTML, and I also picked networking essentials. So I was learning CCNA 1. I tried to do all 4 things, which is 4 different languages in my first semester, and I almost died. And I lost a lot of self-doubt, guys. It's even in your degrees, I'm sure there's definitely been points in time where you felt, oh God, is this really me? Is this really worth it? Is this, it's very challenging. And my advice to you would be, it's all about your approach. So when I had a really good mentor, Dr. Evelyn Dorrell-Lyson at UTS, she basically said to me, Michael, it's all the quick wins. So when I came back the next semester, I did 1 subject and I passed that really well. And then the next semester I did 2 subjects and then I passed them really well. And then the 3rd semester I went back up to 3 and then eventually worked my way up to 4 subjects a semester. And then my marks, it looks like a really cool bell curve. It was down, but then towards the end, I was pretty much getting high distinctions for the end of my degree. And that's the advice I'm giving you guys is, I know on the broader picture, a 4-year degree and those kind of big goals look really massive. But where I found it's helped me with my self-doubt is if I break them up into really small goals, we're not, even for a given subject, you've got X amount of weeks to do all these assessments. I don't worry about the whole semester. I just think, what's the first thing I need to do? Okay, week 2, I need to do this, just get that done. Next thing is your assignment 1. Okay, just worry about assignment 1, get it done. Okay, assignment 2, and then throughout those, obviously you have a lot of different little assessments to homework each week. But when I broke it up and actually just got those little quick wins, and then once I built on that, that's what really helped me overcome my self-doubt. And once you get those runs on the board and you're getting the marks, And to me, that's all it was, because once I started getting the marks, I feel like my attitude to studies and education really changed. And once I realized, actually, I can do this, it was just my approach that was wrong, that really unlocked the door for me to be able to drive it from that point of view. My next one's attitude. So, it's really about driving outcomes and taking ownership, guys. A key example is I'm working with some junior people through Westpac at the moment, and they've been provided an opportunity to really drive a couple of key outcomes. And a lot of them just kind of sit back and they're a bit nervous, and there's a couple other factors at play. But we love to see people who are driven and motivated. I'd want to see someone who's going to come up and go, you know what, I don't know this, Michael, this is what I do know, this is what I need to know, can you help me? And then that's how we unlock doors. It's all about attitude. And one of the things that I actually learned at uni was from a guy who was about 10 years older than me, and it stuck with me for the last 15 years, basically. He said, Michael, anything's possible, you just don't know how. And that says a couple of things to me. One of the key things that says to me is that it's my approach. I think about, I know I don't know how, but how am I going to find that out? There's nothing worse than when you say to a manager, well, I don't know what the answer is. If you go back to your manager and say, I don't know what the answer is, this is what I do know, this is who I can talk to, and this is what I can find out, and this is how I think I might be able to approach solving this problem, your manager's going to go, awesome. And then they might even go, actually, have you tried this and thought about this? That's putting yourself in a much better position than just coming to someone saying, here's a problem, I don't know what to do. And it all kind of stems back to attitude. So it's the way in which you approach the problem, but it's also having that can-do attitude to push through. Outside of that, and just finally, not knowing what you'd love to do. I know a lot of you guys, some of you may be pretty much interested in understand what kind of area in technology you'd like to approach. Some of you may not. I think Adam gave me an understanding. A lot of you guys are spread across a lot of different disciplines. For me, I knew that I always wanted to do technology pretty much. I was very interested and intrigued by it. When I worked for the various companies when I was younger, I always knew that there was an information system or a device that exchanged information. I was very curious about what that was, and I was really passionate about understanding that, because I started to learn, everything's connected by technology. If you understand that, then that really kind of enables you to think about how we might solve problems. Those are the kind of three things for me, and I'll pass over to Rich.
Yeah, I agree. I think the attitude's a real key point there. You've got to be self-driven. You've got to have that discipline. If you're not understanding something, you need to, talk to someone that can help you in that area, or go and research that and push yourself to get through that knowledge. A good way that I've learned, I suppose, is trying to understand, as Michael said, where technology is fitting in and what sort of system sits behind, like a payment system, how the approvals go through, what sort of networks those sort of day-to-day tasks are taking. For my own personal experience, finding an area that you're really passionate and enjoy. Data analytics for me, getting those insights of why people do certain things or their behaviours, or finding key learnings out of data that no one's sort of seen before or understood. I think that's that's something that I enjoy doing, but it's not for everyone. So find those areas that you really enjoy and that you're passionate about, and try and stay in that sort of area.
Absolutely. And Natasha, I was just reading a comment that you posted up about having a dream that one day we can have software development for First Nations people that communicates in a way that's tailored for them. That's just so important. We're actually doing a couple of initiatives at the bank at the moment around exactly that user experience, because when you think of a business or a product, when you put it on the context of banking, how do you provide a service to people in rural areas? We've come across examples where people don't necessarily have a lot of key identifiers, and if you look out in communities, a lot of the way we actually identify and acknowledge ourselves is a different metric or a system than just having a static view of how a bank would say, well, this is your name, date of birth, etc. So I think it's so important for us to build those models around the user experience and understanding the intricacies of our culture and the nature of how we work and operate within our communities. And if we can get to that model, I completely agree with you. And that's back to my point before. There's so much opportunity for you young fellas to come through and dictate that. That's the power of being First Nations people who excel and progress in a career in technology. You actually get to dictate the terms, because I can tell you now, it's an underrepresented area. There's not many people leading a couple of these things in certain ways. There's definitely some inroads. I won't say there's not happening. There's definitely people studying and working across the country. But for me personally, I'm the first Indigenous IT Honours student at UTS ever. And the fact that it was 2017 when I first embarked on that journey, it just goes to show that, a lot of us are kind of fizzling at the lower levels, but we love to see people progress and continue with it to build your knowledge and get those accreditations. And once you have those, it's opened the doors for me to have further conversations with a lot of different people. So thank you for mentioning that, and I think it's absolutely important. Moving on to the next slide. I want to talk about ingredients for excellence. So I'll kick it off with this one for Rich. Oh, guys, just quickly. So what Adam had asked us to do was, if you look at the bottom of the presentation pack, Adam, I don't know if this was shared to them. There's basically a matrix where it talks about, well, these are the key areas and these are the traits corresponding to those key areas. So myself and Richard have kind of taken that, had to think about who would be a role model for us. And these are the kind of traits we would identify with them to determine which we'll get into just now.
Yeah, so for mine, I picked Satya Nadella, who's the CEO of Microsoft, which I'm sure you're all aware of. I don't know if you remember, but when he took over as the head of Microsoft, Microsoft was in a real critical space, and a lot of people were thinking that Microsoft was going to slowly fade away. They had Google, which was competing with the application space. They had AWS that was very strong in the cloud space. And at that time, Oracle was actually a larger company than Microsoft from a market capitalization view. And Satya came in on the back of Steve Ballmer, who I think hadn't done a great job with Microsoft. And Satya really turned the company around. Their share prices tripled since he's been in charge. But I think, some of those traits that makes him good in his role is personal leadership, being able to adapt to change, self-motivated, make sound judgment, but he's also got that vision. He's changed Microsoft's mission statement, which is a pretty big thing for a company of that size. He's driven and self-aware. So in 2014, just as he was starting out as the CEO, he spoke at a women's in IT event, and he was asked a question around equality of pay with women, and his response was that women should be patient and just wait for the market to catch up and give them that equality. Now, after that, Mieni obviously copped a lot of criticism for those comments, and he took that on board and responded and sent an email to the entire Microsoft employee list and apologised for that, and took on that he'd made a mistake, an error in judgment, and hadn't thought that through. So I think as a good leader, you need to be aware of that. We all make mistakes. You'll make mistakes in your working career. It's how you handle those mistakes that will set you apart. Moving on, other traits that I believe he's got, he's balanced. He's obviously got good cultural awareness and diversity. He's exceeded his expectations and Microsoft's expectations by a long way. If you look at Oracle now, Oracle's probably become that company that's missed the boat on the cloud plays and slowly dropping its earnings and looking for a strategic play and where they fit in the future. Satya, he pays a lot of attention to detail. He's still very technical. If you ever hear him give a keynote speech, he really understands IT and that background. He was also responsible for Microsoft taking on and accepting the Linux threat, and instead of taking that as a threat, he took it on as, that's an area that Microsoft needed to move in and support, and that's been a very successful play for Microsoft as well. Other traits, being accountable, which, again, I think he's done a good job on. He presents well, he communicates well, he takes responsibility, and he drives that forward. So I think he's a real good role model and has some great traits in the IT arena.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rich. And, guys, my one was actually Elon Musk. And I guess I don't necessarily have to talk too much about Mr. Musk, because I'm sure a lot of you are very across a lot of the things that he does, especially for himself and especially for the community. When I kind of thought about who I'd like to pick, he's kind of front and center, and it was quite easy to pick him. But I'm sure a lot of you may have your own people you look up to, and if you guys have anyone in particular, please feel free to call it out in the comments. But just touching on, so when I think about the different qualities Mr. Musk possesses, I kind of think of what he's actually done. I always benchmark people against what they've actually done, because people can be inspiring, but I always look at it as, when I try to think of it, it's not necessarily about who you are, it's about what you can do. And I guess what you can do is also relates back to who you are. But I kind of think specifically back to when Musk put out that generator, I think it was in South Australia. I thought, Jesus Christ, when someone can have so much influence and so much knowledge to be able to deliver those kind of outcomes for a community, to me, that's the kind of stuff that stands out to actually to determine these people are really serious about, shifting the dial for certain people and communities to really enforce change. And that's the real stuff that I'm interested in. That's the kind of stuff that I'll be thinking about over the next couple of years, especially for Indigenous peoples like ourselves. He's got qualities around, he's driven, he's self-aware. One of the things I really appreciate about listening to Musk, whenever he does presentations or there's content put out online, when people are doing interviews or having questions with him, he's a bit of a smooth operator. He's very calm. And you can always get the sense he's very knowledgeable, because a lot of the work that he does, and he has that in-depth understanding of whatever he pursues, but he's always very driven to make sure that he, not only once he possesses that knowledge, how does he actually then translate that to meaningful outcomes and actually get things done? The fact that he's pushing us towards a society where we're taking our dependency off the motor vehicle industry, where we're dependent on petroleum and things like that. These are the kind of things that are really changing, shifting the society and how we operate. And these are the kind of people I'd love to see progress through the future, especially through people like yourselves. You guys, everyone says to you, young people today have such more opportunity because you're growing up in an environment where technology is already advanced, and so you've provided more opportunities. And even for the last years of my degree, the trend shifted more towards design thinking and UX, and it was all about that user journey and how do we actually think about the human-centered approach to the way we design and implement technology. So, we're in a situation where you guys have access to all this real cool information. And so we're all very eager to see you guys actually, really drive a lot of key things, and what are the technologies and things you can create and come up with, which are really going to push us forward. So I'm really excited for that. Outside of that though, so, Musk is attention to detail, with a company that's, it was operating the last couple of quarters that weren't at a profit, whereas now he's at a profit. I'm sure when you're changing the game, you've got a lot of barriers and you're trying to run organizations and such. It's so pivotal for you to really have a real strong sense of your business and how it operates. But also, especially when you're working in the space of technology and engineering, there's a lot of smarts you have to apply to a lot of things you build and develop. So I'm sure attention to detail is very, that's just one way I feel Elon Musk is definitely thinking about that. Being accountable and flexible. So, I'm sure when he works with communities about installing technologies and things like that, working with governments and organizations to talk about putting power stations in so that when you do have, electrical cars, they actually have places where you can actually fit that into broader society and how they work and operate. He's verbal and reads cues and leverages experience. So as much as Elon Musk possesses a lot of experience, he's definitely pretty cluey to be able to bring some people along the journey with him. He definitely has pulled the right people in the room to push a lot of these outcomes. And so, that's the challenge I'll set out to a lot of you fellas, because, that's why I love these opportunities that CareerTrackers provides. Because for people like myself who are a bit further along on that journey, in the next 5 to 10 years, I'll be in a position to be able to look to you guys to say who's actually driven and motivated. And I love to kind of connect with you and provide opportunities to you guys to actually further your careers or further your development to try and work on these technologies. I've got a nice little opportunity which I'll talk to a little bit more, but that was pretty much it. So,
yeah, can I just add to that? I think both of those people, one of the things they do have as well is they back themselves. Both of them have had plenty of experience with doing projects or plans or putting in strategic plays that a lot of people would say that's not going to work, can't do that. And, they back themselves, both of them have backed themselves. And I think you need to do that as well. A lot of people will tell you that this is the way it works, you can't change it, you can't do that. And sometimes you've got to experiment, have a go and back yourself.
Absolutely, guys. And, just to finalize that, it's exactly back to my point before, what the advice shared to me, if you don't know, you don't know how, you just don't know how. So I'm pretty sure, Mr. Musk and et cetera, they've worked out a way to say, well, if I don't know the answers, I know how I'm going to find out the answers. And, and for a lot of the stuff they've delivered is a pure embodiment of that expression, I feel. So, cool. Okay, moving on. Accelerating your success. Richard, you want to start with this one, and I'll...
Okay, so what I put down for this was, firstly, I think finding a great mentor. Getting a good mentor is just going to shortcut you to working better. I had a really good mentor when I first came back from the UK at Telstra. And to be honest, when I got back, I was working at Citibank as a database administrator for a massive foreign exchange platform. And, I probably thought that I knew as much as anyone. I didn't have a lot to learn. The person I was working with, just showed me so much. It was not so much technical knowledge, but it was how to do things properly. To service people properly, to document things, to share information. And, that really set me up for so much growth after that point. I worked with him, he hired me, I ended up being his manager, but he was still a great mentor even though he was working for me. The second point I had was changing roles in company. And you need to be careful here. You don't want to change on the whim of you're going to have bad days and bad months, and sometimes you need to weather that. But, if you're working for people that don't appreciate, or you've changed the role and you're not getting compensated correctly for that new role, sometimes you have to leave. And, make sure you never burn bridges. That's a key point. But, if you have to change a role or a company, then do it. Find a company that's got good people and good managers that you want to work for. And the last point I had was staying relevant in your career. So not only, if you choose a career in IT, you really do have to keep learning. I've been a manager of 30 people. I've gone back into a technical role. I've gone back into management. You'll have those changes throughout your career. So you need to stay relevant, keep across the technology in your area, which is increasingly hard to do. There's just so much innovation and advance going. So it is hard. And even if you're working in a role for a long time, I would say apply for a job at least once every 12 months. And when I was managing people at First Data and Telstra, I used to encourage my team to, apply for a job every year and just make sure that they were getting what they deserved in the market, and they were still relevant. People wanted to hire them. My challenge was obviously to keep them happy and keep them in an environment they wanted to work and someone they wanted to work for. But I think you need to do that. You can't just sit back and especially when you have a family or you've been in a role for a longer time, you can get in that sort of point of complacency where you just sit back and you're getting your paycheck and you're living week to week, and you need to push yourself and make sure that your skills are current and that you're employable.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rich. And I was just reflecting on what you were saying, and it's so true. And, for the nature of what you probably experienced that. And once you get your degree, you've got a fundamental understanding of key areas. I'm sure if you do your majors, you've got a bit more specialized and have a further, deeper understanding, especially if things are technical like programming, development, etc. But as you probably would have witnessed yourselves, the nature of how programming has changed back when, actually it was before my time, I'm not going to say I'm that old, it was COBOL, mainframe systems. And then, when I was kind of growing up and came through my degree, it was all about object-oriented programming like Java, Python, et cetera. And then now we're getting into a new sphere where there's actually new kind of languages being developed. So, and in saying that though, it's not so daunting because, I've done a bit of programming myself, and at first it was very challenging, it was very hard, but I find once you get your head over the concepts and the structure, everything else just comes a lot smoother. And when you kind of go down that path of learning how an object-oriented model works, then the different programming languages kind of complement it. You may write the code in a slightly different way, but the principles of how you would write functions and procedures and things like that are relatively the same. It's just the way it's written, or the word for it's different for the different language. So it's a bit challenging at first, but then once you get your head around it, it becomes a lot easier. And once you've got that as a base knowledge, then it opens the doors for everything else. And one of the actual cool things I said to Rich before, and I'll set the challenge for all you fellas who are in development, I don't actually know today one single First Nations full stack developer in all of Australia. I do have a bit of a reach across the country for my various different networks and things that I do. And I would love nothing more than to one day meet one of you, or if you're interested in that, because I can tell you now, there's not one First Nations person that I know of. It's a full stack developer. And if you became that person, my God, I would probably do anything in my power to give you as much exposure and work with you as best as possible, because that would be just an amazing skill set to have. And you'd be the first one, in my opinion, and I'd promote you for that. So that'd be really cool. That's me, I think. Mars, absolutely, mate. We'll connect in with us later, and I'd love to continue the journey with you, because, you know, if you have aspirations to push down that path, I'd love to open doors for you, mate, because, you know, that is a skill set in itself. It's so applicable across all the things that are going to be driving the future, and I'd love to kind of talk to you more about that later. So guys, for me, the three things when I talk about, when thinking about accelerating your success, you know, the first thing I'll talk on is giving back. And I'll give you a bit of a story. So when I started my journey with my degree and CareerTrackers as my first couple of internships, despite the fact that I did a TED talk that Adam sent out to you, you know, what I always like to think in society is everyone sees the end result. When you see success, you see the end result. You don't actually see the hours, the minutes, the days, the blood, the sweat, the tears that actually went into actually the lead up to get someone in the position to actually deliver the result. And so when I say that, when I started my degree and I was starting CareerTrackers, I was a really nervous presenter. I didn't like presenting. I thought, oh, it's not a skill set I have. And, you know, CareerTrackers was fortunate enough to provide me an opportunity to say, well, Michael, would you like to do a workshop, you know, for the winter kickoff, for the summer kickoff? You know, we have opportunities where we'd like to provide that to you so you can actually define your skills. And so I said, okay, I put my hand up and I said, absolutely. And, you know, over the course of the couple of the internship rotations I did, and through the different volunteering that I did at Jumbana at UTS, I facilitated and presented in workshops. And over time, I really built that as a skill set. And that to me is a prime example of how you can demonstrate the knowledge you have. And I think it's so important. You know, the way I look at it is, if you can present something, you understand it. And it's a good opportunity. So when I did the presenting, I found that, oh, actually from a visual point of view, these are the slide packs I created, and I could see the gaps. I could see, okay, I actually need to develop this, or from a structural or how I place things, you know, for the UX designers, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know, the way you present information, you need to work on that. And then I actually thought next weakness is a format. So when I do my presentation style, I need to kind of get to the point. I need to be precise. I need to go a couple of things and drive home a point and go from there. I think there's a concept prep, point, reason, explanation, point. There's a lot of different tools that you have available to you to build those skill sets. And so, you know, I've been in situations from a business context where I learned how to use Microsoft Excel. And I can tell you now, a lot of you, when you pursue careers in technology, you'll face situations where the business will say, this is the outcome we need to get to, but I don't have the money to spend on this application or the development costs for this. So I've had situations where I've actually written reports out of Excel where I've, you know, embedded SQL queries into them to actually form kind of cut down versions of reports to provide to senior managers. When I did integration testing at Metcash, we actually created a data input into an Excel spreadsheet, which actually tracked the orders and the products of all the different customers for a certain group. And that's how we use that spreadsheet to validate our system changes. So what I'm saying is, once you actually develop a skill in technology, whether it be working with applications or tools, actually find examples where you can apply them. Because, you know, technology is a very applied industry. When you actually apply the knowledge and understanding, you'll actually see how it actually works, and you'll build a deeper understanding. And then you'll also uncover a lot of the gaps that you don't know, and it'll further help you provide that expertise. And, you know, I think it's so important that any opportunity where you get provided an opportunity to further refine your skills, I highly recommend that you take it. And what's even better, and what I actually liked a bit more of our career trackers, was the fact that when you're provided that opportunity amongst your friends, your peers, your mob, your colleagues, it's a much safer space to develop your skills. And, you know, I've been recognized at work now to say, Michael, we really love when you do your workshops and your presentations, because you've got such a good discipline, your format's amazing, the way you deliver. And, you know, that's all comes down to the fact that when I was provided the opportunities through Career Trackers, I was able to, you know, there's a couple of things I did wrong. There's a couple of workshops and I thought, oh God, I won't do that again. But again, it provides you a safe space to be able to develop your skills and abilities, so that when you do translate that into business activities, you're far better prepared than most people. Seeing things through. So it's so important for you guys, you know, to me, when I look at degrees, or not necessarily degrees, but learning, you know, all my life, you know, when I was younger, I played soccer. So, in order to progress through the different levels, you had to kind of, play lots of sport and lots of different levels and progress that way. I'm a black belt at Taekwondo. I've been that since I was 14. So there's another discipline example where you start off with a white belt, yellow belt, red belt, blue belt, and you continue right through to black belt. So I kind of at a young age really instilled in me the ability to be disciplined and see things through. I went through the HSC, I went through university, and then it's always about how you're going to set yourself up. Whatever you put yourself into, see it through. When you do your CareerTrackers winter and summer internships, you've got to see that through. Because when you come out the other end, you're going to have all this experience, and it's going to set you up to unblock the next chapters of whatever you pursue. And finally, just having a clear goal, guys. Like, I know there's a lot of governance around CareerTrackers where when you do your first meetings with your managers for winter and summer, you will devise a learning contract. So that's just an instrument. You've got to remember that, and you can apply that through your whole life. What are the things that you want to learn? What are the outcomes you want to get to? Where are the places you want to be? And go for it that way. I know for the ones who are younger and you're just starting off your degrees and your roles in your various different companies, that might be a bit of a challenge. But if you just focus on the learnings and just say, do a SWOT analysis of the industry or the business unit or the area that you're working in, understand what are the key things like we're doing today, what are the barriers, what are the strengths, what are the things you need to think about, and then actually start taking it on yourself to show initiative to develop in those areas. And I always live under the expression, there's no such thing as a bad experience. When I was younger, I had some bad experiences with a couple of roles I had at Metcash. But when I look back and reflect on that, I actually feel like that's built me more as an employee than actually working in a good company and a good organization. And a key thing is, you guys will see it yourselves. If you can get a business outcome, if you can drive a business outcome in tough times, then you're going to be invaluable to an organization. Because I'm of the opinion, anyone can drive an outcome when everything's good and everything's going well. When the chips are down and everything falls, we're in a period of COVID at the moment. So businesses are in a situation where they're trying to just keep the lights on and maintain business operations. But if you can still push through those and motivate your team to still deliver outcomes, that's the stuff that's really going to accelerate your success, in my opinion, and really push you through the barriers for those next steps. Cool. Cool. So we got a couple of questions from Natasha. I'll just have a sec. Do you feel supported by your company and co-workers? Absolutely, guys. So Adam would have sent out my TED talk. I can tell you right now, the only reason why that actually came to be, I actually expressed to my people leader or my manager and said, I'd be interested in this, but I'm not too sure. And, the expression of interest went out for the whole of Westpac, and I think they had 1,600 applications. And the very last minute, typical blackfella time, at the very last minute, my boss said to me, Michael, I think you have a really good message, and I'm really inspired by the work that you're doing, and I think you should apply. And they really supported and gave me just the motivation to want to do that. I put my application in, I got thrown in, I got selected down to 25 people. They went through further rounds, we met with the TED people, and then they came down and said, Michael, you're one of the 16 talkers. And I thought, holy crap. So, that opportunity really came for the simple reason where I was actually supported. From a company point of view, I absolutely feel supported. I have a role of co-chair of Brothers and Sisters, our National Employee Action Group at Westpac. And to kind of summarize it, they create opportunities where if you have a voice and you're driven and you have an aspiration to want to make change, while also, being your best self and taking your best self to work, there's definitely opportunities that organizations do provide. And I strongly encourage a lot of you to try and seek them out. When I initially came in the door of Westpac, I thought there can be situations where you may think, I want it to be off my own merit, not necessarily because I'm a black fella. But I can tell you now, a lot of these organizations, it's all about merit. It's just an added bonus that if you have First Nations kind of heritage, that's something that they're definitely interested in to work with you, because a lot of the work that's happening through reconciliation action plans, a lot of corporate social responsibility initiatives through these large corporates, they understand there's an underrepresentation in this space, and they're screaming for you fellas to, once you kind of come through your degrees and your various different learning avenues, how can we get you into your organizations? Because they want to hear from you. They want to hear your perspectives and insights so that they can actually work on a lot of initiatives for First Nations people. What do you like most about your day-to-day life and your job? I love the fact that I get to work with really smart people from many different backgrounds. I think, especially in my context of Westpac, I have a very diverse team. I think we've got about 20 different nationalities or people from backgrounds from different nationalities in my immediate space. Working for large organizations, you get to work on projects that are heavily funded. Like I said before, mum and dad are from Burke. It's 2,500 people. I got thrown into my second project. It was a $1.4 million project at Westpac, and I crapped myself. I thought, Jesus Christ, how can I go from a small country town, mindset to, and 1.4 million was like what it was church change. We have programs of work where 700, 800 million dollars, and you think, you'll never find any other areas or examples of companies that potentially get to spend that budget. And what's really cool as well is when you kind of go towards larger organizations with budgets, they tend to work on the most modern technologies and frameworks. I've been exposed to new forms of technology like TIBCO services, APIs. I know these things are a bit older, but organizations are really looking to how do we use the next and upcoming technologies to enable our business processes. And I think that's just another example. And finally, what are the best skills, maybe like soft skills, valued to newbies? Listening, guys, as a business analyst, project manager, I have such a developed ability to listen. I go into conversations where I can listen to technical developers talk about right down to the coding and the branches and all that kind of stuff. And then I can have conversations with business stakeholders who actually can articulate business requirements to say, this is the outcome we need to get. And then I can go into meetings and listen to managers to talk about, well, this is a broader team. These are the outcomes we need to drive, which then filter back into my project team, which then filter back into the broader digital strategy. So listening is one of them. I would also say oral and written communication. A lot of my managers love me in the way I present information. We've got pieces of work that track. So I create daily dashboards and I use the templates from organizations to articulate, these are the pieces of work, these are the timelines, and this is what's happening where. And these are the key resources for these pieces of work. So whenever I deliver things, people have full visibility about what they need to know, how we need to get things done, who can we talk to if we need any questions. And, I've been commended a lot of times from my peers about my ability to be able to have strong oral and written communication skills. Rich, you got any?
Yeah, one of the things I'd say is when you're asked to do something, don't feel compelled to try and deliver the result or the outcome as quickly as possible. And that's probably something I was guilty on when I first started working. Often you're given tasks to try and learn and understand those tasks. It's not so much about the outcome. So, I've had graduates work for me. Some of them, you ask them to do a task and they rush off and do it and they come back and what can I do next? And it sort of defeats the purpose of what you're trying to do. And you've had the other good graduates I've had work for me will go away, really try and understand it, learn what they have to do and come back and give you a totally different result. Not only that, will they deliver the outcome, but they will have a really big understanding. I had a graduate work for me at First Data and she was really, really good. She ended up knowing more than the consultants that were paying $2,000 a day. And that was the feedback from the consultants. They said, she knows this platform better than we know it. And that was just because she got stuck in and she tried to understand it and wasn't rushing to get the material outcome.
Absolutely, Rich. And just thinking that to further your point as well, as much as it's not outcome focused, guys, I can't stress enough, if you don't know, put your hand up. And what's really cool about when you're a bit younger and you're kind of starting out, one thing that's really good about corporate Australia is when you're a graduate or an intern, everybody views you differently, not in a bad way, but in a sense of they understand that you don't know all the answers and they're more than willing to help you. When I was an intern at CT, I feel like whenever I put my hand up to say, oh, manager, I don't know how to do this, mate, they used to clear the road. It's actually the manager's job to unblock you to get what you need to get done. That's their job. So, and actually it's flipped now because now I'm actually employed full-time in a junior leadership role. The expectations and responsibilities have gone through the roof, but I remember back to when I was an intern at CT, oh God, everything was so much fun. I just say, everyone, they didn't give you all the big hard tasks because they just wanted to develop you. And managers who are good managers, they'll actually seek out to make sure that they grow and develop you, not necessarily just give you all the crap and hope that you come out the other end okay. Once you go into the grad program, you're kind of viewed as you're the future of the company because you've gone through this intensive program, you've earned your stripes, you're young and you're eager, you've demonstrated yourself, you've beat all the rest, now you're in the company. Or even if you go into a junior position, because when I was a junior BA, I didn't necessarily know have strong skills around how I wrote business requirements and all that. I've done a bit of development work. So when junior developers, they're not just going to throw you in and saying, here's all the coding you need to do. They're actually going to go, here's a cut down section of what we'd like you to deliver. And then there's also going to be like, it's paired programming. So they're going to let you write it. Then they're going to do a commit. Then it's going to be like, okay, we're going to do a code review. And then the senior developer is going to go, okay, blah, blah, blah. And as you progress through companies, there's this structure. From a development point of view, you're a junior developer, you're a developer, you can be up into a tech lead, you can be a solution designer. So there's always going to be that person who's in front of you, and they've developed and built their knowledge and skills in that space. And part of their job as well is to mentor the people below them to build that capability. You know, as a senior BA myself, I have a couple of junior BAs underneath me. And so rather than getting them to write full-blown business requirements documents, I get them to write sections of it. It comes back to me and I help guide them to put it into the broader document before it gets sent off to the business, before they can do a review and etc. And those are the kind of little ways to make sure that we support ourselves. And it's a lot easier when you're a lot younger. And I just want to stress that in corporate or in business, the more junior you are, everyone understands that. And I've never seen a situation where someone just pumped a junior person just to try and deliver an outcome that was unrealistic or unreasonable. Everyone's been pretty practical about understanding where people's skill sets are, and they've worked with people to make sure that we get the best outcomes. And just to further the point as well about asking questions, as a manager, I've said to my team, if we need this piece of work done by this time, if you put your hand up and say, I'm not sure about this and that's going to block me to actually get that deliverable done, I'd much prefer that than someone who stays quiet and then for 2 weeks sits on it and then comes up on the 11th hour and says, oh, Mick, by the way, I've been blocked by this because I haven't been able to figure it out. I've just lost 2 weeks to be able to help you to get to the solution. So, you know, and that's kind of a very quick way to explain how things are in corporate. Managers are more than happy to clear the road, but you also need to be empowered to understand if you don't know, feel free to say, in order to get to this outcome, I need this, this, and this. I'm blocked by this, and then allow people to provide you the opportunity to develop.
Call it out. And for a manager, if they don't know, they can't manage. So
absolutely. All right, we'll move on, guys, to I don't know if this is the next or the last one. And guys, thank you for the questions. We will pivot back to them in a little bit. I think we're into the question cycle, so we might move on to that now.
There was one here. The first one was online learning. What's learning?
Actually, what was the one just above it? It said, what should I start? I hit enter before. My question is
Michael's.
Was that you, Adam? Sorry?
Yeah, you're up to Otis Carmichael's question. Significant problem I'm facing?
Oh, okay. So I think on our end, we're just going to scroll back up to try and find that. Is that it there?
Yeah.
Oh, significant problem facing. In here, fintech, I'm worrying about workplace requiring such a wide variety of tech skills, languages that I won't be able to grow extremely confident in any of them. I'm worried about communicating my skills to role specific. Do you want to start with on this?
Yeah, my comment on that is if you learn one language, as long as it's not too, any of the mainstream languages are going to help you. And you'll be able to switch. It's more getting that understanding of how a programming language works. Pretty much most of them work along similar lines, and I think if you know one really well, you can flip into another.
Yep. And to further that, it's market research. So if you know a company you want to work for that has a certain amount of products, what technology do those products operate under? If it's a Java-oriented applications, or if the core systems that they work is predominantly Java, focus on that and then go from there. And then it's all about, the next thing is, well, how do you understand who are the people in the organization who might be able to provide those questions? So if you guys have any questions like that, I mean, you're more than welcome to shoot me an email. You know, I have such a breadth of understanding of people in different organizations. I'm more than happy to kind of point you guys in the right direction or give you that kind of advice. But yeah, so back to my point. So find out what technologies are leading the company, what they're working on in the future, and what programming languages underpin those frameworks and platforms, and then focus on those as a starting point and go from there. But I think your general skill sets of like your SQL, your Java, your .NET, all those kind of Python, if you learn those as a baseline, I can promise you there'll be opportunities in companies, because those are the core things that people rely on from a development point of view.
Even looking at COBOL for an example, like COBOL, everyone thought would be dead and buried by 2020.
Yeah.
If you're a COBOL programmer now, you're working absolutely fortune.
Oh, mate,
So,
they keep you on retainer for thousands of dollars because all the Cobalt people have either retired or moved off. So, and organizations still run in some capacities on mainframe systems. I think I saw at Westpac, there was one business area under consumer bank. And I looked at the screen, I said, is that a mainframe system? They said, yeah. And I was like, wow, 2020, we've still got mainframe systems.
yeah, and look, COBOL's, it's probably worth learning. There are a lot of mainframe systems. I know, there's just not people, especially young people out there that know COBOL.
Yeah.
And, you can command really big money in that area. So I wouldn't be worried about getting pigeonholed in what you think's a skill that's dying.
Yeah.
They're often the opportunities. It's like access programmers now. There's no access programmers out there, but there's so many companies that have got all these old access systems which were, created years ago, and no one knows how to either redevelop them or to make changes.
Yeah. So to summarize, find out the key programming languages, get your foot in the door. Because another example as well, I currently have a dev team that I manage, and basically I've realized we have a single point dependency where this one developer only knows .NET and this other language I can't think of. And he's it. So I've taken my other Java developers in my team and said, I've now got a roadmap. You need to start learning .NET, start learning this, because we need to share that knowledge across the team. So that'd be my advice as well, is understand what language is going to get you in the door. Once you're in the door, your companies invest in making sure their employees are cross-trained to make sure they don't have knowledge gaps across their technology stacks, etc. Cool. We'll jump on to the next question. I know we've got a couple of minutes left, guys. I guess that we've only got a couple of minutes left, guys, but if you guys have any burning questions, as mentioned, I'm more than happy for you guys to shoot me emails, because I can pretty much give you a lot of mentorship or consultation or advice in any particular area. And I'm more than willing to help you guys in any form or fashion, just to help you either understand it or further progress your careers. And finally as well, I'd love to open my networks to a lot of you. As mentioned before, I have so many people come to me asking for the next young fellas coming through. I need names to actually start pointing to these people to say, this is a young fella who's committed, he's learning in this space. They understand, depending on where you are, if you already kind of got a lot of knowledge and expertise in the area, even better. But I need to start understanding who's really keen and wants to get into these organizations, and how do we start working with you to get them forward. Yeah, cool. So guys, just and I've put up on the slide here, you'll see DigiNet as a brand. And what I really wanted to say to that quickly was, that's actually a company that we've just started. Richard and myself, we've got 5 directors. We're 2 of 5. That's an Indigenous listed business in technology. And the point I wanted to make with that was, a lot of you are going to build skills and expertise in whatever direction you take. But I also want you to understand that you're not necessarily pigeonholed to just doing corporate careers. As much as that's going to provide you a lot of opportunities, and I can't stress enough, I feel like I'm in a position now to start a new endeavor for myself, because I have developed my business rationale and acumen through working in a large corporate. That skill is invaluable, same as consulting, etc. Working in just corporate careers isn't your only avenue to progress your own ambitions. If a lot of you are going to develop yourselves and become SMEs, and what's another real benefit to you is you've got 2 lenses. You've got the development lens, you've got the cultural lens. If you focus on that and think, oh, actually, I might want to contract out to businesses and actually form my own little software development company, or UX, or things like that, you're more than welcome to do that as well. And I'm just putting it out there to say that this is a journey that I've taken on with Richard as well. So I also possess a lot of knowledge around how to actually start up an Indigenous tech company in today's climate, and I'd be more than happy to share that with any of you who have aspirations to do that. And then, as I mentioned earlier in our talk, we're looking for the next youngest and brightest people, so that once we progress this company, we want to be by the community, for the community, so it's so important for you guys, as I mentioned before, to progress and build yourselves in these spaces. And all we can do, and what I've acknowledged, is it's about creating those opportunities for the next generations to come through. So I can't stress enough, guys, you have so many opportunities. All you have to do now is just have that discipline, push through, and go from there.
So this last slide, this was from a Microsoft partner update last week, or this week actually. So it just gives you an idea of the opportunities that are out there. So these are the 150 million new jobs they reckon will be created by 2025, and a lot of that's probably come about due to COVID-ID and the pandemic and what's going on there. But 98 million new software developers, cyber security at 6 million. I actually thought that was under. There's massive opportunities there. data analytics, machine learning, I'm sure you're all aware of that, and AI, 20 million. So there's so many opportunities in IT out there. You don't necessarily have to do an IT degree to get into them. I certainly didn't. It's having that attitude of learning. There's so many resources online that are freely available from Microsoft, Udemy, all those online learning resources out there.
Absolutely. So Adam, I might just wrap up there and pass it back to you. But guys, in closing, I know we didn't get to address a lot of your questions. So what I might do, Adam, I don't know how we can record some of these questions. I might just try and copy paste them to Notepad and I'll send them back to you with feedback directly. But outside of that, as mentioned, guys, you're more than welcome to always reach out to me to ask advice or to just even have a general chat. So I always welcome anyone who wants to learn more about technology space.
And the same for me.
Oh, the same as Rich as well. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm happy to take emails and respond. And, if you do start your careers and get out there and want some advice or feedback, and I'm sure Michael's the same, we're happy for you to speak to us about that. And hopefully one day, you may end up working with us at DigiNet or some other capacity.
Or changing the world, yeah.
Yeah,
Next Elon Musk.